I call them the J6 hostages, not prisoners. I call them the hostages. I'm a very proud election denier because unless the truth is found, we will never have fair, free, and honest elections. We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
Donald Trump has skipped the debates. He has done far fewer political events than his rivals, but his incendiary and dangerous rhetoric has shown the kind of general election campaign he will run and the values he would bring back to the White House. Trump has vowed to use the Justice Department to go after his enemies. He has suggested that former Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley should face the death penalty. And he has said federal prosecutor Jack Smith will end up in a, quote, mental institution by the end of his presidency. And at 2:03 a.m. on Thanksgiving, he issued a long screed on social media calling a New York judge a psycho and personally attacking a court employee by name who had already received hundreds of threats, many of them anti-Semitic, in the wake of previous Trump statements. At this moment, though, Donald Trump leads in the polls and is the overwhelming favorite to win the nomination. But there are some signs that could change. ABC News has learned that Americans for Prosperity, a group backed by billionaire conservative activist Charles Koch, plans to endorse one of Trump's rivals in the coming weeks and is prepared to spend heavily to try to bring Trump down. Our political director, Rick Klein, is here to break down the state of the race.
Yeah, John, we are now just 50 days away from the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary just 8 days after that. And as you mentioned, Donald Trump is far and away the front runner right now. But we have reviewed at ABC News some of Americans for Prosperity's internal research, their polling, their door-knocking data. And their view of the race is that most people don't think it's even begun. In fact, about 40% of Republicans in Iowa and New Hampshire say the race hasn't even started yet. And their research suggests that as many as 75% of Republicans might be open, just might be open to a Trump alternative if they think that that person can win. And their view, they say that there's a lot of money that can be spent on a ground game on organization. The last time that they had any kind of public report on this, John, they had $70 million in the bank to put toward an effort to try to defeat Donald Trump. And in part what they're looking at is the public polling on this, because we are seeing a much different primary play out nationally than in some of the early voting states. In the national polling average at 538, Donald Trump's been leading wire to wire and big. Right now, he's up 45 points plus on his closest rivals. That is not a close race. It isn't the same, though, as in the early states. In Iowa and New Hampshire, we're talking about 27, 28-point leads. Critically, Donald Trump's winning by a lot, but he's under 50% in both of those early voting states, and that gives Trump's rivals a lot of hope, that maybe even expectation, that once people start to engage, there's a chance of changing those numbers and maybe someone breaks through in one of those states.
All right, Rick, but he still has a big lead in Iowa and New Hampshire, just not as big as he does nationally. But as we know, Iowa and New Hampshire love to deliver surprises.
Yeah, and some history here is really instructive, John, because back in 2012, the last time that Republicans had an open primary race or to go up against an incumbent president, at this point in the election cycle, this is what we saw. Newt Gingrich leading the field. Rick Santorum, who went on to win the Iowa caucuses, was way down at 4%. He leapfrogs everybody just in those last 50 days. Similarly, in 2016, Ted Cruz, the eventual winner, had to overcome both Ben Carson and Donald Trump. At 12% at this point of the polling, he ends up being the surprise winner. Now, in New Hampshire, we all remember what happened with John McCain and his late surges. At this point in the cycle in New Hampshire, according to our polling, the race was basically tied in New Hampshire between George W. Bush and John McCain. Of course, McCain ended up winning big in that upset. And then in 2008, maybe an even more interesting example, because McCain won the primary that year by winning New Hampshire. But at this point in the cycle, he was in third place. Again, he had to have that late surge, that late upset. So look, John, there's never been a candidate who's had this big a lead nationally or in early states who didn't go on to win the nomination. But there are lots of signs and now lots of money to suggest that this race could still be interesting.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.